Later tonight, the Prime Minister will leave Kathmandu to return to Delhi. But were the 2 days he spent in Nepal at the SAARC summit useful or somewhat of a waste of time? The answer to that question depends on whether the summit has achieved anything or ended in failure. With me to answer that key issue is India's former High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Veena Sikri, India's former Ambassador to Nepal, Shiv Mukherjee, and India's former Ambassador to Italy, Rajiv Dogra. Mr. Mukherjee, with just one agreement to show, do you believe the SAARC summit is a failure? The press, by the way, is convinced it is.
Well, I don't agree with the press, and I don't think that's just because, you don't count the success or failure of something like a SAARC meeting by the number of agreements signed. I mean, foreign service officers pride themselves on finalizing 10 agreements for a visit and so on, but that really it's not the criteria for the success of a visit. I would say, unless there are unrealistic hopes that every SAARC summit will produce huge path-breaking initiatives, which is not the case, I would say this Prime Minister Modi is coming back satisfied. This is his first summit. Right from when he was inaugurated as Prime Minister, he has underlined the priority this government gives to its neighbors. He has repeated that domestically as well as outside. This offered him a platform which he used very well to underline that. There was a bilateral element to the visit with Nepal, which was successfully done. In his speech, just to round it off, he made the usual motherhood statements about cooperation and so on and so forth, but made, as he always does, I've noticed, some specific proposals about Indian initiatives. So I would say he's coming back a satisfied man, and I would say the SAARC summit was, if you call it, I mean, if you use the word success, that it was a success in terms of the objectives that are realistically to be considered.
What do you think, I want to rephrase that question, this SAARC summit achieved?
I think from India's point of view, from Prime Minister Modi's point of view, a very useful first interaction in a SAARC summit context.
But he had that interaction in May.
But that was a bilateral. Here he saw them all acting as a group together. And I think that's important because Prime Minister Modi realizes the complexities. His speech, he said...
You mean it's opened up his eyes to something he wasn't aware of?
Let me say in his speech, one sentence, we will cooperate in South Asia through SAARC or outside SAARC. Some of us or all of us. So he knows the complexities and the provision within SAARC for sub-regional cooperation.
But did he not know those complexities before he went? Did he need to spend 2 days in Nepal to achieve this eye-opening vision?
Let me tell you, India had gone full strength ahead with the Energy Pact, with the Railway Pact and the Road Pact. But if Pakistan has not decided to clear them, now that's
hence
the point.
My question, given that Pakistan didn't clear the Road and the Railway Pacts, has this summit achieved very much?
Well, energy is a very important agreement. It's a commodity that's going to be traded. But let me say, I think Pakistan has been isolated.
But we come to that in a moment's time. But as a summit, has it in your eyes lived up to its potential this time around?
Yes, it has.
There are many who say, Mr. Dogra, that beyond providing a regular 2-day platform for the regional heads to meet, have lunch, tea, dinner, shake hands, there's not much more utility to these summits.
Well, let me give a different perspective. You asked whether it was a failure. I wouldn't call it a failure, but I would call it extremely frustrating. One of the most frustrating SAARC summits that has happened in recent times.
A waste of time for the Prime Minister?
It is not a waste of time, but it is an eye-opener for people, not for Mr. Modi or any of the other leaders. Eye-opener for people that we have not moved ahead. Remember the Vajpayee-Musharraf summit in Kathmandu in the same place, and it was equally bad, perhaps worse, because they had to cancel the retreat. Now coming back to the positives, let's look at what is happening in other regions of the world.
No, let's not. Stick to the positives here.
No, because there they meet every year and more than once in a year at the summit level. Here, at least once in 2 years, we are able to meet with difficulty.
But that's what I said to you. It's simply the fact that they come together as heads of government that the summit has utility, but in terms of actual productivity beyond that, is very limited.
Well, let me take that on also.
No,
because
one at a time.
If there was no summit or if there was no mechanism of summit, look at the number of visits our previous prime ministers have had to Nepal.
So the mere fact that they meet is important, and that itself is an achievement. In which case, let me put this to you. Has the poor state of India-Pakistan relations hobbled SAARC? Because not just in India and Pakistan, but many of the other smaller countries firmly believe that when the two countries get on, SAARC achieves progress, and when they don't, and they're sulking or they're avoiding each other, it's stymied.
Well, Karan, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's a given. There's no, without any fear of contradiction from any country or any individual, it is a fact that SAARC has been hobbled consistently by Pakistan's intransigence and its one-point agenda of saying nay to whatever India suggests, even if it is the best of all initiatives. So to that extent, let's not forget the history of SAARC. It is extremely important to understand whether the summit is a failure or a success in the SAARC context. As you said, let's not compare it with the European Union or ASEAN or whatever. Those are totally different backgrounds and kettles of fish. The fact is, SAARC began under Ziaur Rahman by creating, by his wanting, with his visceral sort of, for whatever reason, his dislike for India, to create a club where Indian domination would be countered by a club of all the others, which would be able to keep India in not so dominant a position. It's a tribute to Indian diplomacy that we embraced it and yet brought it to a position where cooperation is more in focus than simply other countries getting together. Our relationships bilaterally have changed for the better and so on. Therefore, in this summit as well, if you've noticed, all the other countries agreed on connectivity, all the other countries
except Pakistan,
and this has consistently been the case in other initiatives, in other summits. But the significant thing I would just like to underline before you pass on is what Veena mentioned, that Prime Minister Modi explicitly made it clear that within SAARC regulations there is the possibility of sub-regional cooperation, and we will move ahead with or without Pakistan.
But that's the point I want to pick up on. You see, there are many critical issues that SAARC, if it were genuinely united and genuinely cooperative, could tackle and tackle very effectively. Terror is one of them, trade is another. But given their internal divisions, their rivalries, and not just India-Pakistan, they don't achieve very much. Do you ever see SAARC getting over those internal divisions and rivalries and sorting these issues out?
You know, I think here I'd make an important point. The point I mentioned about Pakistan being isolated is very relevant here, because one is that Pakistan is scuttling SAARC, but the second most important point is, do the other members appreciate India's commitment to SAARC? I think that came out very well this time.
But you don't have nonetheless progress on things like trade and terror where it's needed badly.
That is where the sub-regional aspect comes in, because even on terror you can have sub-regional cooperation, and as long as...
In which case you don't need SAARC.
No, of course you do. The SAARC concept of a regional cooperation geographically based south of the Himalayas is a very real and relevant one. Let's not forget
theoretical, it's not producing any practical results. That's the point.
Afghanistan is beyond Pakistan, so you do need SAARC in that sense, but the realization of the members who were present of India's seriousness and India's willingness to sign off on those, and you know what our Prime Minister said on South Asia University, we want the cooperation. He's given them
basically what you're saying is, thank God for India. Without India, their SAARC wouldn't succeed. And I suppose as Indians, we're quite right to give ourselves a huge pat on the back, but it doesn't seem to give SAARC much of a boost. One of the problems SAARC faces, and it was looming up in a big way even at this summit, was China's genuine desire, or maybe political desire, to join, one that many other countries, not just Pakistan, is quite keen to sponsor. And given China's close links and role in Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Afghanistan now, Pakistan of course, possibly even Bangladesh, how long can India ensure that China is not a member, or even as an observer, its role is limited?
Well, I don't know whether it will be wise to get China in as a member. That's my personal opinion.
And that's not on the table.
No.
It may not take long for some other country to put it on the table.
No, it cannot be on the table.
It cannot be on the table. There's a moratorium on. There's a moratorium on fresh membership.
No.
This request is for a dialogue partner.
No. That may or may not be an issue. But the fact is that supposing 1 year on, 5 years on, or 10 years on, China gets in as a member, is it in our interest? That was your question. I don't think it is in our interest.
That's the question I was asking you. How long can India stave that off, given that other countries, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, have close links with China and may want to agree?
I don't think we can stave them off for very long.
That's the point.
I don't agree with that
and second, you may not, but let me complete.
One at a time.
China wanted to become a member, and we said that that could be possible, provided you make us a member of SCO.
Which they're now prepared to do.
So
they may be calling your bluff on that one.
Things might change.
Absolutely,
so
but is it in our interest that they should?
I think the trade-off is not
Very
SCO.
briefly, I'll give you both the sides and I'll give you the via media. Very briefly. Rajiv's point was, which is a very commonly accepted point, that we are 80% of SAARC population. Like it or not, no matter how we cloak it, we are the most important country.
In other words, what we want goes.
Putting it simplistically, when China walks in, it is the elephant in the room. and slowly Indian domination gets diluted. That is what China wants, and therefore it is not in our interest.
And it may be what the
I think that
Pakistanis and
argument
some others
does
want.
not hold water. Number one, the fact is that if China wishes to dilute Indian influence in SAARC or outside SAARC with our neighbors, it will do so regardless of SAARC. It is already doing so. It has already used its clout to very good effect in Burma, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, and so on.
The point that you're not answering is what happens about the possibility that the Pakistanis, the Sri Lankans,
they
the
will get
Maldivians may want to bring China in.
Yes, they do want to bring China in. They've said so explicitly.
Absolutely.
And we should embrace it instead of sulking in a corner.
I don't agree on that.
We should actually allow China to be a member.
We will eventually be forced to accept dialogue partnership as we sought and received dialogue partnership in ASEAN and ARF.
Let us just say one thing. Let us first accept
the fact. So therefore,
it's wonderful when I have diplomats behaving like
this is the
politicians.
democratic tradition. This is the democratic tradition of South Bloc.
Well, we make your program
therefore,
interesting.
instead of being pushed into it reluctantly, it is better for SAARC is not an overriding umbrella which will destroy India's foreign policy.
When you say we should embrace it, would it be a bit like a turkey voting for Christmas?
By all means, make them a dialogue partner. And I think the via media I was talking about is exactly what has been agreed to in SAARC, that the program committee will set up some checks and balances about the dialogue partnership.
First of all, let's recognize clearly that China is out to scuttle SAARC. Number one. Number two, let's recognize equally clearly that SAARC is a geographical organization. It's an organization of South Asian countries south of the Himalayas. It's not SCO. It's not, let me give the comparison of EU or ASEAN. EU is a geographical organization. America has excellent relations with EU, but it's not a member.
We have borders with four.
ASEAN is a, don't interrupt, I didn't interrupt. ASEAN is a geographical organization. India and China have very good relations with ASEAN, but we're not members. We have a collaborative relationship.
We have a dialogue partnership.
Similarly with China and with other observers, not especially for China, all other observers, and then many of them, China, America, EU and the lot, we can find out a method of collaboration on specific projects, issue-based, but there's no question of membership.
Which is what the program committee is going to do.
Mr. Dogra has been maintaining his calm very peacefully. Surely he needs the benefit of a word before we come to the end. Where do you stand on this issue of China?
Well,
because you conceded one thing, India can't stave it off forever. So do we have to embrace it as Mr. Mukherjee is suggesting, although he keeps saying embrace them as a dialogue partner, they want to come in as a full-fledged member?
You accept the reality.
Or will that be the end of SAARC?
Two things. I mean, the end of SAARC or beginning of SAARC, no one knows where it starts and where it ends, because it's not produced anything much so far. But coming back to China, the very fact that a couple of countries, despite India's displeasure, supported it vocally in their plenary statements, that should be a signal for us to be worried about. Second, we can stave it off for as long as we want because SAARC operates on the principle of consensus. But does that give us much hope?
In which case, can I interrupt you and put this to you? Is SAARC therefore an organization with a limited future, and when China becomes a full-fledged member, will India's interest in it end, thus ensuring that SAARC also ends? Is it therefore a limited future organization rather than one that's there like ASEAN or the European Union for the foreseeable future?
Well, you are asking an ex-diplomat that. So
I'm hoping an ex-diplomat will be truthful and not avoid answering.
I'll never use the word limited. But there's a bleak future and it will remain bleak so long as Pakistan is there. If China gets in, it will become bleaker still. But
bleak with Pakistan, bleaker still if China gets in. And most people believe, just a moment, Mr. Sikri, most people believe China will get in. So bleaker still is the real future.
That unfortunately
China cannot get in unless India wants it, and India cannot want it because the future of SAARC will be scuttled by China's presence. So that is very clear. So if India wants China to wants to scuttle SAARC, they will say yes to China. If India wants to do something for SAARC, they should go ahead and do it. Push for cooperation in any sub-regional, but not let China get
Very quickly, a last word from you.
I disagree because in any case, if China wants to do something inimical to India's interests, it will do so with or without SAARC. It already has. It has.
Okay.
The fact is that India has its borders with 4 SAARC countries or 5 SAARC countries, and so does China. We have always wanted to. Finally, you see, we have always given the impression that we do not want to dominate SAARC, and by keeping China out with all the arguments, we will underline that we do want to dominate SAARC.
No, we want to
We've
progress
reached the
SAARC.
end of this particular
It's a
discussion. It's been
geographical
fascinating to have three diplomats behaving like politicians. I must tell you, do a superb imitation of them. My thanks to all three of you for coming to
We're
studio.
the real
And there
thing, not
we
the
end this
imitation.
particular episode. If you have been, many thanks for watching. Time for that.